Okay, so let's now proceed with our last lesson for discrete math. So in the previous section, we have seen what a relation is. And in that definition, it's just a subset of our Cartesian product. And in that subset, in choosing those elements, we consider what we call our open sentence. Okay, so now we look at our functions. Function basically is still a relation, but this time we will now follow a rule. And how do we follow a rule for functions? So this rule will now assign for every element x in the first set, which we can call the first set as x, a unique element y in the second set y. Okay? So if we will try to define that, there will be two sets involved for a function. So let's say this is our set x and then this is our set y. And then let's say we have our elements in our first set as x1 up to xn. And then let's say for the second set, we have y1 up to yn. So if we now have x1, let's say is paired to y2, let's say x2 is paired to yn, and then xn is paired to y1, we can now call this as the rule existing between set x and set y. And we can call that rule as rule f. So if you will notice in the definition, it tells there that each element in our first set gets a unique partner in the second set. So it means if you will look at this graphically, each element in the first set must only have one arrow going out of it and being paired to the next set. Unlike for relations, isn't it that for relations, since it's a subset of our Cartesian product is we just pair every element of the first set to each element of the second set. So that cannot happen now for functions because for functions, each element here must have a single or unique partner in the second set. Okay? So normally for diagrams like this, we can have this as y or f is now a mapping from f now is a mapping from set x to set y. Or in some symbols, we can also have this as y is equal to our f of x. So we have this as y as a function of x. So that notation will now be read as y being a function of x. And then when we look at all the possible values, of the first set, we will call this as our domain. And then if we look at all the permissible values of the second set, we call this as the codomain or also known as the range. Similarly, di ba, nakita natin sa relation, if you get all the first elements in the ordered pair, that's your domain. If you get all the elements in the second elements in your ordered pair, that's your range. So somehow, ganun pa rin yung dating dito sa function. Okay? All permissible values of the first set is your domain and all permissible values of the second set will now be your range. Now let's look at this example. If we will look at this graph, and let's say this graph is now given by y being a function of x. So each element or each ordered pair in this graph would now be the elements of our function. So if we want now to consider the domain of this, we look at, since this is y is a function of x, we now look at all permissible values of x. And we have here our x-axis, we have here our y-axis, So if we would now look at the permissible values of x, we now look at this range from this point up to this point because this is the end of the curve. And if this is 1 unit, so this must be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Therefore, our domain must now be from 0 to 7. So that will be our domain. And then if we want now to look at our range, since we are looking at all permissible values of y, then we now look at this section up to this section. We have the permissible values of y. And if that will be again 1 unit, that will be 2, 3, 4. This is -1, -2. Therefore, our range will be from -2 to +4. So that's our domain and that's our range. For the second example, we have f of x is equal to 2x, or you can also write this as y is equal to 2x minus 1. Pareho lang ibig sabihin yan. Remember, we are coming from y equals f of x. So if f of x is 2x minus 1, that's just the same as y equals 2x minus 1. So normally, a function is represented by an equation. So in this example, if we are again after the domain and the range. So remember, the domain is all permissible values of x. So for this one, what possible values of x can we have? Isn't it that if you will analyze this, x can actually be any real number. Okay? So your domain is x is any real number. Then, if x is any real number, if you substitute any real number here, then the value of y will also be a real number. Therefore, our range will also be the set of real numbers. So unlike the first one, meron tayong specific range. Dito, we have infinitely many values since x can be any real number, and for any real number x, we get a particular value for y, which is also a real number. Then after our domain and range, we also have what we call the operations on functions. So if we are given two functions, f of x and g of x, we have the first one, the sum of two functions. So f plus g of x is defined as f of x plus g of x. So for the difference, if we have f minus g of x, it's f of x minus g of x. Okay, and then for the product, f times g of x is f of x times g of x. Quotient, we have x over g of x, or f over g of x is f of x over g of x. Of course, for the quotient, we can include here the condition that g of x must not be equal to 0 because division by 0 is not allowed. And for the fifth one, this is a composition of functions. So we have f dot of g of x is defined as f of g of x. Okay, let's explain how we can obtain those using some examples here. So, first example, if f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3 and g of x is x minus 1, find the following. Letter A. Let's have letter A. Find the value of f plus g of x. So I have intentionally included here our formula. So f plus g of x by definition is just f of x plus g of x. So what do we do here? We just substitute. If f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3, we just add this to g of x, which is x minus 1. And then we just apply our algebra of combining similar terms. X squared, 2x plus x is 3x. And then we have minus 3 minus 1 is minus 4. So this resulting function will now be the value of f plus g of x. Okay, that's the value of f plus g of x. Now for letter B, if we want now to get the difference, f minus g of x, we just go through the definition. This is just f of x minus g of x. Substitute values. Our f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3. Just be careful with the sign here. Don't forget the sign of grouping. Minus x minus 1. So this must be equal to x squared plus 2x minus 3. Distribute the minus sign. That becomes minus x plus 1. Thus, this is now equivalent to, combining similar terms, we have x squared, 2x minus x will be positive x. And then we have minus 3 plus 1 is minus 2. X squared plus x minus 2 will now be equivalent to f minus g of x. Next, we need f, so letter C. So letter C, I have copied all the problems here. So letter C, we are now after f times g of x. So just go over your formula. This is just the same as f of x times g of x. Substitute values. Your f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3, while your g of x is x minus 1. So we just distribute, we multiply, so that will be x cubed, then that will be minus x squared, and then this is plus 2x squared minus 2x minus 3x, and then plus 3. Combining similar terms, we get x cubed. This is negative plus 2x squared, that will be positive x squared, negative 2, negative 3, negative 5x, and then we have plus 3. So this resulting function will now be the value of f times g of x. Okay? So similar process will happen. Now we look at letter D. So for letter D this time, we are after letter D. We are after f over g of x. Again, by definition, let's look at this. It's just f of x over g of x as long as g of x is not equal to 0. So f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3. And we divide this by x minus 1. So if you want to simplify this further, you can now use your long division. You have x squared plus 2x minus 3 divided by x minus 1. X squared divided by x is x. X times x is x squared. X times minus 1 is minus x. We subtract. This will change sign. This will become positive 3x. 3x divided by x is positive 3. 3 times x is 3x. 3x times minus 1, positive 3 times minus 1 is minus 3. So we bring this down, minus 3, we subtract, this will be 0, this will also be 0. So the remainder is 0. Therefore, the simplified value of this is just x plus 3. So x plus 3 is the equivalent value for f divided by g of x. And then, let's proceed with letter E. And in letter E, what is required? We have f dot g of x. And by definition, this is just f of g of x. Okay, ito yung medyo iba ang dating. So, what do we know? Diba? Ang alam natin dito is f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3. This is f of x. So what we will do is, since this is f of x, each value of x, di ba? Gagawin kasi natin magiging f of g of x. So, instead of having f of x, we will now be having f of g of x. And g of x is x squared minus 1. So, ang mangyayari, bawat x natin, marami tayong x, bawat x natin sa f of x, magiging g of x. Therefore, this will now become, di ba? F of g of x. So, ang f of x natin, so remember, ang f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3. So, itong x na to, gagawin nating g of x. And ang g of x natin is x squared x minus 1. Therefore, each x that we have here will now be replaced by x minus 1. So, our f of g of x will now be, x will be replaced by x minus 1, so that's x minus 1, the quantity squared, plus 2, x will become x minus 1, and then this is now minus 3. So did you get that? Again, if f of x, di ba, x yan, in terms of x din ito. So if f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3, so if you now replace your x by g of x, you now change each x by g of x. And g of x is x minus 1. Kaya yung x squared, yung x, papalitan mo ng x minus 1. Kasi papalitan mo siya ng g of x. Okay? Yung x dito sa 2x, papalitan mo si x ng g of x, which is x minus 1. And then we just simplify. This is x squared minus 2x plus 1. Distribute, that will be plus 2x minus 2. And then that's minus 3. Combine similar terms, we have x squared minus 2x plus 2x is 0. We have 1 minus 1 minus 4. X squared minus 4. So this will now be the value of f dot g of x. Okay? How about letter F? Letter F is we want to consider g dot f of x. So let's just use the definition. G dot f of x will now be the g of f of x. So, pinagpalit lang natin. So, pag naging g dot f of x, magiging g of f of x. So, what happens here? We now look at g of x. So, ano yung g of x natin? Di ba? Ang g of x natin is x minus 1. So, ang mangyayari, yung x value natin dito will now be replaced by f of x. So, kung yung x natin dyan, mapapalitan ng f of x, bawat x value natin dito, mapapalitan din ng f of x. Therefore, if g of x is x minus 1, replacing x by f of x, where f of x is x squared plus 2x minus 3, then that will now be x squared plus 2x minus 3. Changing x by f of x, and then minus 1. Or this is now the same as x squared plus 2x minus 4. Let me just fix that. That's x squared. So final answer there will be x squared plus 2x minus 4. Okay? Now for the last one. The last is the g of x. So by definition, this is just the g of x. Okay, so what will happen here? So g of x, going back to this one, g of x is x minus 1. So if we now replace x by g of x, we now replace each x by x minus 1. Kasi yung g of x, di ba? Yung g of x is x minus 1. So, we have replacing x by x minus 1. That will now be x minus 1 So yan, ito yung pinalitan natin. And then, may minus 1 pa. So that will now be x minus 2. And that will now be for g dot g of. Okay. And that's it for operations on functions. So akala nyo, at the end na eh. Hindi pa. Last section. So the last section now is the value of a function. If y is a function of x, then f of a denotes the value of a function when a is substituted in place of x. Actually, ganito na yung ginawa natin in the earlier example. So if we are given, if f of x, please edit this. This should be if f of x is 3x to the fourth minus x squared plus 5, determine f of 2. So the solution is actually given here. So if f of x is 3x to the fourth minus x squared plus 5, so if we want to find now f of 2, we just want to get the value of x equals 2. Therefore, we just replace each value of x by 2. That will be 3 times 2 to the fourth minus 2 squared plus 5. Or that will now be 2 to the fourth is 16. 16 times 3 is 48 minus 4 plus 5. 5 minus 4 is 1. 48 plus 1 is 49. That's why the value here is 49. So we just substitute. And let's also have this example. Compute f of x plus h, f of x plus h minus f of x all over h if f of x is x minus 1. So if f of x is 1 minus x, ano mangyayari? Kung kukunin natin si x plus h, f of x plus h, we just change x by x plus h. So that part will be 1 all over changing x by x plus h minus f of x is 1 over x all over h. So this is now our f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. And then if we will simplify our value, so for the numerator, our LCD there is x times x plus h. X times x plus h divided by x plus h is x times 1 minus x times x plus h divided by x is x plus h multiplied by the numerator, which is equal to 1 also. Then everything divided by h. Simplifying further, we have, isn't it, this is all over 1. Shortcut in algebra, we can draw our brackets here. Inner bracket will be the denominator, outer bracket will be our numerator. Or the basic rule there is we get the reciprocal of the denominator multiplied by the numerator. Anyway, let's do the shortcut since we're assuming that you have already learned that in your algebra. So this is just 1 multiplied by the numerator will be the numerator itself. So that's x minus x plus h. So I have already simplified the numerator. Then everything divided by h times this. So you have h x times x plus h. X minus x will cancel out. So final result will now be h all over h. H times what happened there? H times x multiplied by x plus h. And then h and h will cancel out. Therefore, our final answer is just 1 all over x. 1 all over x times x plus h. This is now the value of f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. Okay. So let me just rewrite that if you like to see that. This is f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. And this will now be our final answer. Okay. And the good news is that's the end of all our lectures in